and bee campuses that are doing just excellent work. So it's really a treat to get to talk to you all. Let's see here. Let's see if the presentation, are you seeing the right view now?
Yeah.
Okay. All right. So I'll just give you a quick run through what we're talking about. I'm going to cover today. I'll tell you a tiny bit about the Xerces Society, then a bit about pollinators, a bit about Bee City USA, and a bit on Bee Campus USA. Then I'll talk about actions we can all take, whether or not your community is or is going to be a Bee City or Bee Campus. And that will have examples from our Bee Cities and Bee Campuses for inspiration. And then I'll share some free resources. And then I'll pass it over to Pamela, and she'll do more of a case study. All right, so the Xerces Society has been around for, I think, close to 60 years now. We have about 100 staff throughout the US. We're named after the Xerces blue, oh, I misspelled extinct butterfly that went extinct in the Bay Area due to human development. We have a number of programs, but kind of the big ones are endangered species, pesticide reduction and mitigation, and pollinator and agricultural biodiversity. And then we do some other stuff like policy making and education and outreach. We are a donor-funded nonprofit. A huge percentage of our support comes from individual donors. So thank you if you are a donor. And if you're interested in becoming a member, that's one of the best ways you can support our work at xerces.org/give. And so I'm just going to talk a bit about starting off, who are our pollinating neighbors? Many times we think about bees, but there's also pollinating butterflies, moths, flies, beetles, wasps, even ants, a couple different birds, bees, of course, and even more, like even some cockroaches can pollinate. So it's just amazing the diversity of species out there that are pollinating everything we depend on. But of all the pollinators, bees are the #1 contributor to pollination worldwide. They are considered the most important pollinators. In the US, we have 3,600 species of bees. They range in a wide range of sizes and shapes, tongue lengths, flight distances. Some are generalists, so they can visit a whole bunch of different flowers. Others really need only a few particular species and cannot survive without those flowers, and vice versa. Many of those flowers are very dependent on those bees. Some of the smaller bees will only fly a few yards in their lifetime, while some of the larger bees can fly even like a mile or two a day, even longer. So habitats of many different sizes and shapes and varieties are all valuable to support our bees. Overall, plants reproduce. 85% of flowering plants require pollinators to reproduce. The rest are kind of stuff like wind pollinated. But the vast majority of flowering plants do need a pollinator, and many of our fruits and seeds would not happen if it wasn't for pollination. And they feed not only us, but they feed birds and mammals and all these other glorious species that people love and want to have around. Personally, we can all thank bees for about 1 in 3 bites of food we consume and things we drink. And they contribute over $30 billion in value to crops in North America. And I like to think of it as basically pollinators give us all the fun foods. If you like chocolate, coffee, berries, tomatoes, all the things that make food kind of fun to eat, squash, we can really thank pollinators for those wonderful, nutritious foods. And of course, what we picture for pollinators, that's one of the things, I think one of the big misconceptions is we think of bees, we think of a hive, but the vast majority of bees live underground and they live alone. They're not nesting in a hive, in a group. They may be neighboring other bees, but they're not cohabitating. About 70% are ground nesting. The rest are usually stem nesting or cavity nesting of some other kind. And then 90% are solitary nesting. So they're not living in any sort of man-made structure. or big structure above ground that's like a unit. You don't need to build anything is what really we're taking away with this. You don't need to create an object to house native bees. You can just, I'll get into it, but you can just have natural landscape to really provide for them. Um, Honeybees are not considered native to the US. They were introduced from Europe, and they're not a focus of Bee City USA or the Xerces Society. We focus on invertebrates that are native to the US and North America. Some of our affiliates do choose to do beekeeping, but it's really, I think it's a controversial metaphor, but I feel like it's really appropriate to say that having honeybees is like raising chickens to save songbirds. Like if you're trying to save our native bees, having honeybees is not going to help them. So it's fine if you want to raise bees and whatnot, but you really need to make sure you're creating enough habitat to support that hive. So if you're bringing in a honeybee hive into an area, they need about an acre to 5 acres of flowers. So they can really be a net drain on an ecosystem if you introduce them into an area with limited floral resources. They're going to compete with native bees, potentially spread diseases and parasites, and they can be very costly to maintain. So just something to keep in mind when thinking about pollinator conservation. And also, honeybees are not endangered. Though we do have a lot of hives dying, they are not going extinct. But globally, other pollinators are in decline and going extinct. Globally, about 40% of pollinator species are at risk of extinction in the coming years. And in North America, about a quarter of our bumblebee species are in decline. But we know what the drivers of pollinator declines are. Habitat and biodiversity loss and habitat degradation are a big part of it. Pesticide use, and that includes herbicides, insecticides, fungicides, diseases and pathogens, and climate change. And the thing is, it's not just one of these factors affecting bees. All these factors intermingle. So if a bee is stressed from heat, they may be more susceptible to disease. If they're experiencing a high pesticide load, they may not be able to navigate to the limited floral resources in their area. All these factors play into each other. But luckily, we know how to help them. There are basically 4 ways we can help pollinators, our native pollinators. We can plant native plants that bloom consistently throughout the growing season, basically late winter through late fall, and just have a variety of beautiful native flowers. That's one of the key things we can do, give them food. Next, natural nesting sites, in addition to that bare soil of various types. But also dead leaves are really important to them, native leaves especially. Stems, dead stems, hollow and non-hollow, logs and branches, just kind of a little bit of mess. They're like all those natural features you might see in a natural landscape. Next, we know we can help them by reducing or eliminating pesticide use. And finally, we need to spread the word. We can't take these actions just ourselves. We need more people to be taking action. We need to put up signage so people know when they're seeing native plants and what this habitat you're putting up provides. You can talk to your friends about what plants you love to plant and what does well in your area and how they can reduce pesticide use. You can write articles for your local paper, newsletters, and you can talk to your elected officials and say this is a priority to you. So what can native pollinator habitat look like? It depends where you are, but it can really look like so many different things. There's a great quote from Lady Bird Johnson, who's done a ton of work around flowers and wildflowers, especially in Texas. She said, I want Texas to look like Texas and Vermont to look like Vermont and every state to look like itself. And I think that's a really nice takeaway is like, well, the more you put these native plants in, the more your community is going to look unique to your area. So you're not going to be cookie cutter with Michigan or Utah. It's really, you really become special and unique and you have your own flavor to your community. So I'll just go over a couple kind of types of habitats you might not think of that can be good pollinator habitat. Office landscaping, one of the advantages of that is it tends to be pretty stable, maintained sites. So switching out non-native plants for native plants, talking to grounds crews and contractors about not spraying those native plants with chemicals and instead hand weeding, telling them what areas are not to be mown. All these things are things you can incorporate into a conventional office landscape. Stuff like parking strips can be really, and roadsides can be really beautiful pollinator habitat that allow people to really interact and see these beautiful flowers. And I'll get into it, but it can help with kind of connecting habitat. Wetlands and bioswales can be great habitat. Oftentimes there's a budget to put in plants in these areas for like stormwater mitigation. So finding out what habitat is, what they're going to be doing in your area, and then seeing if you can incorporate more flowers into those projects, more native flowers, and make sure there's no gaps in bloom times can really be a kind of a, you're kind of double dipping and getting a double benefit of this habitat of cleaning waterways and providing resources for other priority species, and then at the same time helping those bees and other pollinators. Green roofs are a super fun option. I've seen a ton with our bee cities and bee campuses, and I've seen everything from like a rooftop farm to like a grassy meadow, and it's just super fun, and it can be a really exciting way to incorporate pollinator habitat of all kinds. Rights of way like utility lines and roadsides can be really beautiful habitat and relatively permanent. And then just even your own yard can be beautiful habitat. It can be something large like this, or it can just be a few containers. Just a few containers will help bees and other pollinators. So every little bit counts. But adding a little chaos, a little messiness to that project can really do a lot to help as well. So keep that in mind. Maybe make a messy corner or a leaf pile or branch pile in the back. There's a great idea called um, mullet gardening, where it's if you have like an HOA or something, maybe you have it business in the front yard and party in the back. So you have all the wild stuff where people don't see it as much. Or even just the back of the front of the yard can be a little bit more chaotic when it's tucked behind some shrubs, put those leaves nearer to the house than the front. But all that to be said, all these different types of habitat united together become stepping stones that can become corridors. And so that's super exciting to me. You can have your vegetable garden having some blooming herbs. You can have a pocket prairie where part of your lawn is converted into a meadow. You can have shade-loving flowers that are native tucked under your apple trees. Just really, you can think outside the box, and all these habitats work with each other, and then bees can travel through your community. And then not only do they have lots of food sources, but they also eventually can have higher genetic diversity because they have connected habitats. So it allows them to interbreed, and you get a more resilient population. So the sky's the limit with what you do with pollinator habitat. So next up, I'm going to just talk a bit about Bee City USA and Bee Campus USA. We have affiliates all over these days. It kind of looks to me like a population density map, I'd say. We have the little purple blue triangles are the campuses, and the orange circles are bee cities. And as of today, we have 334 bee cities and bee campuses in 47 states, plus Washington, D.C. is a bee city, and we have 2 universities in Puerto Rico. So yeah, we're still chipping away and getting to those last few states. We're in the works with at least North Dakota. And we're about 50-50 split between bee cities and bee campuses. In your area, we have over a dozen bee cities and 4 bee campuses. And then you can see around Maryland, we have some additional ones. And down in North Carolina, I know we have a North Carolina visitor. They're a huge number of affiliates in Virginia, North Carolina, South Carolina, and Georgia. It's a real hub. So just a brief overview. We've been around since 2012. It was originally a North Carolina-based nonprofit. It started in Asheville by a woman named Phyllis Stiles. And when she retired, Xerces adopted the program, and we've been running it since 2018. And collectively, all of our affiliates since 2019 have engaged over 1.7 million people in habitat conservation, or pollinator conservation rather. And they've protected over 18,000 acres of habitat. So really just monumental work. And what I think, much like planting those native flowers, one of the things that I think makes this program special is the uniqueness of every town. We give pretty simple commitments for certification, but then each community makes these events their own. So we say, have a pollinator conservation event, have a pollinator conservation habitat. like focused habitat, and then they make it whatever they want it to be. So it's each community is very unique and very special with how they choose to carry out these commitments. And one thing I'd emphasize when taking on pollinator conservation work is we're looking for progress, not perfection. You don't have to have everything figured out. We just want communities to chip away at these commitments and try to get better and better each year, reduce those pesticides each year, increase pollinator habitat each year. Um, but it's a pretty simple process to become an affiliate. We have a relatively straightforward application online. We accept applications year round. That's true of both cities and campuses. Universities and colleges apply to be campus, and cities, townships, and counties apply to be city. But everyone fills out an application. Cities have to pass a resolution through their city council, basically agreeing to the commitments of Bee City. And then they pay an application fee of $100 to $500. They form a Bee City committee that carries out the commitments. And then they have a city department that sponsors this work and a liaison with the city who kind of like just helps the Bee City work through everything if they have questions. And then each year, affiliates have to have a habitat project and an outreach event. And then within the first few years, we ask that they create or improve their city's integrated pest management plan, which basically says we're going to try other stuff before we choose to use pesticides. Once they've been up and running for a full calendar year, all of our affiliates report each February and pay a fee of the same amount as based on population of $100 to $500, which the fees can be waived if that's ever a barrier to participation. Campuses, it's very similar. They just need permission from the highest elected or highest official rather than passing a resolution. And then the only other thing that's different is they also have to incorporate pollinator conservation into curriculum, continuing education, and have a service learning project. And then they also report and pay $100 to $500 each year based on student enrollment. And again, it can be waived. The benefits is that they get to be a part of this great community. You get to work with each other, share ideas and resources. We provide a lot of resources, but you can also, just network within your community through this, kind of unify people around this concept. It also is a great way to support local businesses, create healthier campuses and cities, and potentially improve food production at community gardens and urban farms and whatnot. I'm going to move a little faster, but direct benefits, we send you a pretty welcome package with materials. You get access to an online portal. We give you a logo and street sign artwork. And then we do ongoing training with ongoing resources. And you can consult with Xerces for free. And then, we promote all our Bee Cities good work as well. And then occasionally I get to fly out and visit affiliates and give online, in-person help and support and just celebrate successes of our affiliates. Campuses also get 2 ASHE stars points, which if you're familiar, it's kind of like LEED certification for green buildings, but this is like a certification for sustainable campuses. So it's a big deal to have these points if you need them. Just to wrap things up before I pass things off, we have our affiliates do a zillion different types of events, everything from trivia nights to photography classes to parades and everything in between. It's just really inspiring to see their work. And a few of our all-star affiliates even have dropped pesticide use altogether on municipal property, which is quite the amazing accomplishment. So I just wanted to give them a shout out real quick. But there's a way that we can all reduce pesticide usage, whether or not you become a Bee City or Bee Campus or are a part of one already. Number one, you can just pull weeds by hand. It's a classic for a reason. You don't need to spray anything to prevent weeds. You can just yank them out of the ground. You can organize volunteer crews to adopt medians and parks around your community to take the pressure off of staff to try to maintain stuff chemically. One great way you can reduce weeds is by just rotating mowing times, especially around like drainage ditches and parks and whatnot. So you're cutting plants down before they go to seed. So you can prevent the weed seed pressure for the next season. If you have problematic plants that are really susceptible to like pests, You can try switching them out for native plants over time and rotate out stuff like crepe myrtle to something like eastern redbud, something that's still showy, but isn't as susceptible to some of those pests that you commonly spray for. And then just a really direct replacement if somebody wants to use a wand sprayer to kill weeds. Encourage people to try steam weeding or flame weeding if it's safe with fires. A flame weeder is pictured there. They're super easy to use. Just hook it up to a propane tank. Steam weeders are really cool. They can be a little more expensive, but if a city is interested, a number of our affiliates have invested in them, but you can get like a tanker truck sort of setup where you can drive around and then you just spray steam on weeds. And it's cool because it kills the weed seeds and just turns the weed into compost. So it is like such a straightforward way to take care of weeds. And it only penetrates the soil a little bit, so it doesn't do a lot of damage elsewhere. And then my favorite thing is when our affiliates rent goats and sheep to control kudzu and blackberry and ivies and stuff. I just think that's the coolest, fun thing, old school way to take care of a problem. And finally, I just wanted to mention that if you're looking to really reduce pesticides in other ways beyond not spraying them yourself, look at how you're buying plants. Really, I encourage you to focus on buying organic plants and organic seeds. Oftentimes, the nurseries do not know what has been how their plants have been treated when they get them from buyers. There's many different people involved in that growing chain. So the best thing you can do is avoid them altogether and just go with organic. Secondly, you can look to avoid neonicotinoids and other systemic pesticides, ones that stay in plants, especially woody plants, for a really long time. And then you can also go the extra step and actually ask your nursery, do you know if it's been treated with any of these chemicals? We have them listed on our website. If you go to Buying Bee Safe Plants, Xerces, if you just Google that, you can find more information. But there are a number of chemicals that really you don't want to spray on a pollinator friendly plant. And studies have shown, even especially if they're labeled as like bee friendly, they are often have higher pesticide loads than a plant that isn't labeled that. So you really have to be careful about purchasing. But if you can't avoid it, seeds are better than plants, and knock the soil off of plants if you don't know if they've been treated, and just at least get that potentially treated soil off the plant before you put it in the ground. You can also remove blossoms for the first year or two to prevent attracting pollinators to a plant that's been heavily treated. Finally, we have free resources. If you go to xerces.org and click on the map, you can find regionally specific resources, including our recommended pollinator plants for your area. And then if you want more information about Bee City or Bee Campus, you can visit beecityusa.org. There's an application page for both with printable resources, including our pretty bookmarks and brochures that are in Spanish and English. And you can also reach out to me at beecityusa@xerces.org. And thank you so much. And I'll pass it over to Pamela.
There we go. Washington College, the campus, what was it called? The College on the Hill. We're in Chestertown, Maryland, on the eastern shore of Maryland, right on the above the Chester River. Part of our campus is actually on the Chester River as well. It was established in 1782. George Washington literally had something to do with it. He traveled through our area quite a bit. And he was on our board of visitors and governors and also gave money to the campus. So that kind of establishes how long this campus has been in this spot and kind of plays into what we discovered there. Let's see here. Go to the next slide, I think. Next slide. Then hit that button. Yeah, there, I think, did it go? There we go. Kind of slow. We have the campus, the main campus is actually an arboretum where we have a collection of native and non-native trees. which are important to what we've discovered there. Maples, poplars, sycamore, shadbush, birch, beech, chestnut, Osage orange, elms, just to name a few of the plants. The maples, I think, are the most important of all of them for the bees that we've got there right now. We became Bee Campus USA, the first one in Maryland, back in 2018. You can go to the next slide. We also have two other campuses, both of them on the Chester River. One is down in town on the river. It has both athletic facility, but also an environmental hall where they also have native plantings and research and stuff going on there. But this is our river and field campus. It's I think 4,700 acres. It's both farmland, marsh, woods, and then they have this natural lands project, which is an experimental grasslands. So they do a lot of different trials as far as grasses and flowers. And each year it's a little different because they were trying recently. There's some actual research going out there on this past summer where they were burning in the spring or burning in the fall and then seeing what plants and what kind of ecosystem ended up coming out from that. And they're getting some ideas of how they're affecting the plants in the grasslands and thus attracting or destroying the bees and the pollinators. So this year, I think they're actually looking at seeing the effects on the bees specifically. So that's kind of exciting, where some of our campus is actually researching for bees and for pollinators. Next slide.
One second.
Yeah, that's
Oh,
fine.
okay.
There you Shane,
Okay.
whoops. Shane Brill, who's on the right there, and the Washington College campus garden were the ones who actually started Bee Campus USA at our college in 2018. And Shane was basically interested in the domestic non-native honeybee. And of course that, that's that that culture working with the bees in the garden in a contained area and then trying to keep the hives alive, which ends up being what a lot of them are ending up doing. He was usually working with the students, he still is, and trying to start and maintain hives. And at the time, I was sharing an office with him, and I really didn't know anything about Bee Campus USA when he started, got us connected to that. And then I was thinking, well, what about the native bees? What do we have here? What about the native bees? What do we have? And he was pollinators I could find. I've really started out at the River and Field campus and then came back to the main campus. Next slide.
It should be switching in a sec, hopefully.
Okay. There's a delay.
Yeah. Okay.
So the students would learn to maintain start the hives, maintain the hives, and then collect the honey. So you see on the right there, they're collecting honey. On the left, this young man, he got interested. I think he was a chemistry major. He took a medicinal chemistry course and got interested in working with one of our professors, Dr. May, who was researching honeybee diseases, foul brood specifically. And so that led to him working with Dr. May for research. And you can go to the next slide. Here's Dr. May and the student. And Dr. May is chemistry in a chemistry department. He started doing growing the bacterial, whatever he found in the pollen, and then trying to extract different things and finding the different effects on these bacteria. And his colleagues in the chemistry, you're in a chemistry level, they got a little nervous. He was doing microbiology, but what I tried to do with him, and I've gotten this professor interested. I brought him pollen-laden bumblebees. I would capture the bumblebees, bring them to him. He would collect the pollen, and he was finding some different bacteria, different things in the bumblebee pollen. Of course, honeybees, now there's research that, you know, honeybees and bumblebees are both colonial, social kind of insects. One's native, one's not. But the transfer of diseases from the honeybees to the bumblebees is because they are social insects. So I'm kind of getting him interested in the wild native bees and doing some research on what he's finding in the pollens of those bees. We'll see how it goes, but he was all excited the last time I talked to him. So next slide. This is just them extracting larvae from the hive. Next slide. Okay, and you can hit the button down there too. This is our college on the hill. This is actually the spot where the first building was built in the 1700s. That building, of course, is a lot of old buildings. It burned down. Of course, you got students in a building. That's going to happen. But then they replaced it with the building in the center. So that building, all three of these buildings date from the mid 1800s. So this spot, this hill, has been there fairly untouched for that, that length of time. And it faces south, which is also important. And we didn't realize until COVID hit and everything was shut down completely. There's no way they were going to contain me, and I'm wandering the campus. I kind of discovered there was a large ground nesting bee right there. This is Center Hall, and then on the left is Stone Hall direction here. So across this hill, it had a huge super nesting super site of aggregation of ground nesting bees. And I just started taking photographs of all these bees. And then I was posting on INAT, and you can go to I think the next slide. There you go. What I photographed first was the Andrena. They come out early, usually end of February, early March. It really depends on what kind of winter we've had. They haven't come out yet this year, but we've had a pretty cold winter. So this one is actually out at Rafsy. This species here is out at Rafsy, but it's a great photo of a female who's collected pollen, and right now she's just sunning herself. But next slide. This is Andrena barbara, and that seems to be what the main species is on campus, or at least the earliest one. This female is guarding her ground nest. They're mining bees, so they dig into the soil and very deeply and put a little ball of pollen, multiple chambers. On the right, the top, and then down at the light, that's what the yard looks like on our campus. The campus green looks like in the spring early when these Andrena barbara are nesting. I mean, we just got much above ground, but you see where they are turning the ground up. Next slide.
Pamela, your audio is a little choppy. I think if you can turn off your screen, your video screen, it might help with your connection.
Okay, we'll do.
Great.
There we go.
Thank you.
Did that help any?
I think so, yeah.
Okay. I got a photo. Most of these photos are mine. Well, all these right here are mine. Here's a female digging with her front feet and her front legs and her mandibles digging her nest. And on the right, bees in the grass. A lot of times when you hear people talking about these bees, they talk about the bees in the grass. Next slide. Oh, and you can hit the button. I promised to do a better video this year, but this is a Andrena digging its nest, and it just makes you tired. I don't know how in the world they can focus and get that done as deep as they go. It's amazing. Well, anyway, if you want to go to the next slide, you can. See where we are here. So I had been putting all this info up for a couple of years on INAT. I don't know if anybody's familiar with that. It is a collection site for research. We usually put photos of live insects. I've been starting to photograph actual pinned insects as well. And that's where Cornell got in touch with me. They saw my photos, they saw my listings, and they were curious because they had, Dr. Jordan Kuhneman had started a ground nesting bee research, and he wanted to fill in the blanks where there's not a lot of research on a lot of these bees. In fact, it's really interesting when you search ground nesting bees online, a lot of the stuff that pops up is how to get rid of them and how to kill them. And I was really shocked to see that, because these bees are maybe above ground for a month or two at the most, and then they're gone. They're underground all the rest of the year. And I'm thinking, what in the world? And they don't sting, they don't bother you. And I'm like, why in the world would that be the major thing you're looking at? So I said, yeah, first I was like, are you serious? Are you really doing this? And he was. So last year we got in touch. I started to look a lot closer at our aggregation and found more information for us. And then this year he wants us to do a full-on research project. You can go to the next slide. So this is the hill with the 3 buildings. So I went out and kind of gave a rough idea of where we're actually seeing the super nesting site. On the left-hand side, there's been a lot over West Hall. There's been a lot of construction, a lot of disturbance of the ground. That's also the area where we do our commencement, our graduation. So the bees are really not welcome on that side since the graduation is usually in May. So we would still have bees probably cruising around. So I'm good with that. If they will leave the right-hand side alone, we've got a good, huge nesting area there. We've got multiple Andrena species. Andrena barber, I think, is the main early one, but then we've got a lot of others that are in there as well. And then we've also have Colites coming in. The cellophane bee comes in usually May 1st. And they're also all nesting on top of each other. That's what's really amazing. You've got these little tiny Andrena, mid-size Andrena, then the Andrena barbara, and then the Colites, and they're all on top of each other at the same time. And so it's really fascinating. So I had collected a lot of specimens and gone over to see Sam Drogay at the USGS Bee Lab, and he sat down and just kind of going through what I had. And one thing he said that I really hadn't thought about, we try so hard to do all these plantings for the bees, flowers and different things to feed them, but we don't allow them to nest anywhere. And that's a perfect example. The ground nesting bees, perfect example. We aren't providing, or we're trying to, not provide the pertinent nesting area so they can survive. But this one's perfect because it's south facing, very little trees. It's been there undisturbed for decades, and it's got the best soil. In fact, Buildings and Grounds, they hate this site because it won't grow grass at all, but it's perfect for the bees. And so they're fighting it, constantly fighting that. So I've got them to hold off at least 1 year so we can do this research and find what we've got there. But they've, I'm not too sure all they're doing. But if I can get Buildings and Grounds on my side for a little while, then we could figure all this out and save the bees for a little while. So you can go to the next slide. So this is, the first blush of bees that I have collected there, just to give you an idea of the size range. We've probably got 4 or more different Andrena. We've got the one Colites. We may have another Colites that is there later in the year because I found a parasitic bee that feeds on a different Colites, and I was like, I found it right on the main campus. And I'm like, there may be somebody else here, so I'll have to keep looking all year round. You can go to the next one. This is Andrena barbara. You can see the mandibles, and they use their head to dig that ground, chewing up rocks. Next slide. Also, Andrena barbara, you can see the females here with the pollen. They've collected pollen. They'll go in and out of their nests, and they'll also sit in their nests to guard them, to protect their nests from the next bee. I think it's on the next slide. These are the nomad bees. They are kleptoparasitic bees that actually go in, they sneak into the nest and lay their egg on the pollen nectar ball, and their egg will usually hatch first, and they will destroy the Andrena larva and then feed on that pollen and nectar and come out in the spring from that nest site. So these are like, I always think of them as clowns because they got all the stripes and the colors. They're very interesting. The kleptoparasitic bees, the cuckoo bees, are very fascinating, and not a lot's been done on them. So between the Andrena and the nomad bees, there's a lot of species discoveries and things to still be done with these bees. Next slide. So this is an Andrena a nomad bee I collected back in, I think it was 2021. And I put it on iNat, and a couple other PhDs got on there, and they're like, we're gonna identify something, one of these on iNat. We got to do it. And so they kept working on it. I kept giving them whatever pictures they needed, and they finally came out that it was Nemata annulata. And so we got one nomad bee identified on iNat. So this is one of the bees, one of the parasitic bees on the Washington College main campus. Next slide. And this is a photo I took of an Andrena guarding her nest with the nomad bees waiting outside. So when she leaves to go collect more pollen, they're going to try to go in there, lay their eggs and whatever. So next slide. And they're really beautiful bees. I mean, they look more like wasps. They don't, they don't dig their own nests. They don't feed their own brood. They just simply, live off of someone else. As one person at the Bee Lab said, there's a lot of drama in the bee world. Who knew, right? So just about every family of bee has its bad seed, its black sheep. They're the cuckoo bee of the family. And that was another interesting thing to discover through all this. Next slide. So you can hit the button. This is our hill, 1st of May, when the male Colites start emerging. It's just, it's constant, low-grade bees. And you can sit out there in the middle of them. It's just fascinating. Sit right in the middle of them. They'll kind of bounce off you, to go on about their business. They won't bother you. They don't care. So it's a lot of fun, actually, for me to go out there and sit in the middle of this, because most of the other people are going like, you must be crazy, because they don't know that these bees won't hurt you. So next slide. And you can hit that button. This is a low ground view of the males just kind of flying around. When the females do emerge, it's kind of like this battle on the ground. The males will just descend upon her, and then somebody wins. And the whole time, if she's healthy, she's like trying to get away and trying to fly away. So usually one male will get her before she takes off. A few times I've seen where it's just rather peaceful, but they're beautiful bees. I mean, beautiful, beautiful bees. Next slide. And again, some females sunning themselves on a cool, cool morning and with the pollen on their legs. Next slide. And they'll also be sunning themselves on the leaves, just kind of hanging out. They're real chill. Next slide. And this is a female guarding her nest. And then on the right is a different nomad bee that was, checking out this Coletes nest. Next slide. So what Cornell wants us to do, and I've got a field methods class that's possibly involved, interested in being involved. Also some other students that are involved. Every student has to do a senior capstone experiment or research project. So I'm trying to get some students interested in doing that and making this a long-term project for themselves. Also, there's some others that are just interested in insects and want to, participate. So Cornell has sent me the collection tent, and I've got to decide on the spot. I'm going to put that up and probably fence it off to keep people out of it. Because I've got to leave it up for about 6 weeks in the same spot. And this is an emergence net where we will put it down and leave it out. And as the bees emerge in the spring, we're going to capture them in the top, clean them out each week, and we will see what's coming out. We'll get probably cuckoo bees. We'll probably get, hopefully, multiple types of andrena. I'll probably have to reset this if May 1st up where the Coletes, the cellophane bees, actually nest, because it's kind of a separate spot. I'm gonna guess probably up there I will get not only Coletes, but I'll also get some other andrena species up there. But we'll collect it through the top. I haven't put this together, so I'm not sure exactly how it works, but I've got an idea. We'll also do pollen samples. That means we'll collect females, like the female samples you've already seen with the pollen on them, and send them. And they'll be looking for pesticides and other, problems in the pollen. I want to try to connect the pollen to a specific, source. I know the andrena are on the maples. I've already photographed them, going to the maple trees, but I was wondering what other trees, plants in our area that they'll go to. We also do brood soil samples where we dig down to the nest level and then take a soil sample from that. He wants to try to find out what types of soils, the bacterial things in the soil, various things, chemical, microbiological, other sampling he wants to do with the soils. Also looking at the area vegetation, the tree cover, that whole area is mostly clear with no trees, especially early spring. There's no leaves yet, just the buds on the maple trees. But then when by the time the Coletes come in, there is a good tree leaf cover on the trees there, and they don't seem to mind that. And by that point, they probably appreciate the cooler temperature. And then we'll also count meter square nest density. And with some of the smaller andrena, you can see the big Coletes holes and the larger andrena holes, but I'm not sure if we're going to be able to count the smaller andrena nest holes because it's by most of those points, it's going to be impossible to see them. So you can go to the next slide. This is a cellophane bee 4-month development. You can see the cellophane, the lining that the female puts around her pollen and her egg. And then this is 4 months out, how far it's developed. I was actually kind of surprised how much it had developed at that point. This was from when we were taking a soil sample this past year. And thank heavens for keen-eyed student with me, because I probably would have missed it. These guys are so small. So I'm just kind of like aiming for an area and just say, that's the soil sample you're going to get. Next slide. And then, of course, I'll be collecting the females. And you see here, I did this last year. There's a male on the right. And I'm not sure about the Rufus cellophane bee, if it looks like a female, but I'm not sure. So we'll be doing that as well, collecting. And hopefully we're going to be seeing, you know, how many other varieties are out there. So it's kind of exciting because it's a large area, and to have that many bees on top of each other in one area, it's just amazing. And I know that our buildings and grounds folks have burned down the hill before when the Coletes were out and tried to discourage them, and they didn't discourage them, which is, you know, aces for the bees. But now that we're trying to educate them, and Jordan, Dr. Kuhneman was like, well, maybe they can do their burning off the hill in the afternoon instead of in the morning when the bees are active and actually doing their thing. So we'll see what happens. But I'd like to get students involved. We've got one intern that's working on the Arboretum, and I want to get him involved, defining what trees and pollination sources we have on campus, because there are a lot of bees there. So, you know, I know it's not just our campus that's feeding them. It's got to be, you know, a neighborhood, because this is kind of an urban environment. There's got to be other areas that they're feeding. So it's very interesting. And also just it brings some research to main campus, which I think our president was really happy about. He's like, oh, good, we got something on campus, because we have things at the waterfront. We've got things out at RAFC, but we don't have anything on campus. So that's what we're doing, bringing it to campus. And I think it's probably the next one's the last slide, right? Yeah, set the bee free.
Beautiful.
All
So,
right, thank you. Thank
you're
you so much,
welcome.
Pamela and Laura. You can unshare, come back. I'll put a spotlight on you. Put a spotlight on. Can't do that because you're not, okay. And we will open it up for questions. You can put your question in the chat box, or you can raise your hand and you can ask directly. Who wants to go first? Don't be shy, everybody. You have a question. I have a couple of questions down here. I gotta read my handwriting here. The bee-friendly plants, can you explain that again? Why they are if you go to a store and buy something that was bee-friendly, why they are not bee-friendly?
Yeah, so if a plant is marked like butterfly plant, like as far as like this is friendly to butterflies or bee friendly or pollinator friendly, that's not a regulated term. It's not like an organic certification. It just means that someone has labeled it as such. And we've done research, the Xerces Society, of plants that are marked as pollinator friendly at nurseries, specifically versus other native plants that we know are the same pollinator plant, and the pesticide load on the ones that are advertised as pollinator friendly just happen to have a higher pesticide, fungicide, herbicide sort of levels in them. We're finding more chemicals and nastier chemicals on those plants. So that's just to say that it doesn't tell you anything, and it possibly means that it's maybe perhaps a big box store who's saying, oh, this is pollinator friendly, let's mass produce it, and we don't care how this plant is grown at the grow site. So it could be that sometimes it's accidental. This is not to say it's malicious that this is happening. Oftentimes, growers may be reusing soil when they're doing starts. It could be that they just have a common practice of, if we see any leaf damage, we spray the following chemicals. And the thing is with native plants is you will see some bugs chewing on those native plants, because those are the plants the native insects are looking for oftentimes. So a little bit of aesthetic damage is nothing to worry about. It's many times you'll have bug holes in your plants, or even like leaf cutters will fully cut a nice pretty circle out of your leaves and then roll up that leaf or a petal as like a cigar, and they line their tunnel nests with those that plant material for their babies. So it's okay if those plants are damaged, but it isn't necessarily what growers want to see. And so they may treat those plants accordingly when those visitors come and enjoy that plant. So again, it's not malicious. It's just something to be aware of, that it doesn't tell you it's safer just because it says be friendly or pollinators love me.
Gotcha. Gotcha. All right, Richard, you have your hand up. Go ahead.
Thank you. Good evening. I know you didn't want to talk about honeybees, but February, the crocuses come out. I see honeybees on there. That's how I tell when it's going to get better. But since most native bees apparently are ground dwelling, which I believe, because I think I got attacked a couple times when I was a kid from ground burrowing bees. Do native bees come out early to flowers like this, or are they going to wait until April or May or June, or what are they doing now? Because they don't have hives. I mean, honeybees are obviously taking the nectar back to the hive. Ground bees, what do they do with any nectar that they gather?
So I'll let Pamela answer the question about when they're emerging for your area, but I just wanted to preface by saying they can emerge. It depends on your area, but there's some that emerge real early in the year, others mid, others late. So it totally depends. But in general, a lot of these ground nesting bees are kind of early risers, so they're coming out in spring, not summer as much. But that's not to say all of them are. But in general, most bee species cannot sting or choose not to sting. They're very, very gentle. So oftentimes people think they got stung by something that isn't necessarily able to sting or not interested in stinging. So like it could be yellow jackets or some kind of wasp. But
It's
even
pro-
wasps, mini wasps can't
it was
sting.
probably yellow jackets.
Yeah, that's common. Um, but yeah, Pamela, if you want to answer what time you're usually seeing them emerging.
Well, the first ground nesting bees are going to be emerging here any week now, especially if the weather stays warm. Usually I'll see them 1st of March. They're kind of low key because it's when you start seeing, well, I know you talked about crocuses, but when you start seeing the maples bloom, the maple trees bloom, they're like the first trees blooming. They love the maple trees. So that's what they're looking for. The ground nesting andrinas are looking for the maple trees. So, but they'll go to other things as well. But once you start seeing those maple trees bloom, then you know that your ground nesting bees are going to be out. Even though if you don't see them, they're going to be out for that. But yeah, I agree. It's probably ground nesting wasps is what everybody steps into. Yeah, it gives the bees a bad rep.
Also, I found this interesting when I learned that the males, once they emerge as babies, when they grow up and leave that ground nest, they don't ever go back underground. They just like one of my favorite things to spot, and anyone can try to do this. If you have some native flowers in your yard, if you go out once they've emerged, early summer especially, well, really most of the way through the summer here in Oregon, if you go out in the early evening or early in the morning, just as the sun's coming up, and you look at your flower stems, you may find groups of male bees sleeping together in these little tight bunches on flowers, and it's really cute. I've gotten videos of it. It's just amazing to see. I've long-horned bees that nest in groups, and it's just wonderful to see. They all gather together and fight for space in the evenings, and in the morning they're still sleepy and they move slow. And what they're doing is they're waiting on flowers for the females to emerge from their nests, and so they can mate. So they're never going back underground, the males. They're just gonna live their life sleeping on flowers that season.
His answer, his question about
Is that true for all males of the ground, or just some species?
As far as the solitary nesting ground nesting bees, I believe that is true for all, but there always seems to be an exception to a rule, so I can't say for sure.
and the cuckoo bees, they're the same way. You'll find them, but actually the females and the males will be hanging out because neither one of them have a nest. To answer his question, they collect pollen and nectar. They take it back down to the brood cells underground that they've dug, and then it turns into this little ball. They make this little ball, and then they lay their egg on that little ball. And that's what they're trying to keep the parasitic bees from getting in there and laying their egg on the same, ball of pollen food. So.
Do the adults overwinter, or do they die?
Once they emerge in the spring and they mate and then build their nest, lay their eggs, they all die. So the only thing still alive is what's underground. Now I think there's some, there is one type of bee. It's, shoot, I can't remember what it is right now. There is one type of bee, it's a different family, that actually the females may overwinter. And I know the bumblebee females overwinter. So don't kill any bumblebees first time in the spring, because you'll be destroying any potential, bumblebees for the rest of the year. So.
I want to go to Roland's question in the chat. Does it make sense to protect the native bees on Washington College campus and designate the area as a wild bee protected habitat?
That's what we want. I don't know if I can talk them into it. If the president's interested, we might have a chance. And I've got one person who's, I think, in charge of the buildings and grounds, and she's on board. She's curious. She's been curious for years, just like I was, about what was going on. But she has the people in charge, that are, I don't know, I can't gauge what the overall campus, BVG, all the people in charge, what their thoughts are. So we're taking it 1 year at a time. And if we can do some research on this and discover what we've got there and give Cornell some information, I'll just take it a year at a time right now.
Cool. Richard, you have your hand up again.
Yeah, but before I go, I wanted to ask a self-centered question about Washington College. I'm close enough that I can drive over there, and I believe they do a lot of bird banding and research there also, do they not?
Yes, out at the River and Field campus, they have a bird banding station and a bird glass testing station as well.
Yeah, I follow them on Facebook. If I drive over there with my cameras hanging from me and just walk around the campus, is that legal? Am I going to get locked up, or?
You mean main campus?
Yeah.
Or do you want to go to River and Field campus?
I'll probably go to both. I like I love the historical buildings. I didn't know it was that old. That's the first place I'm going to go, to that mound and take pictures of those three.
Okay. Yeah, you can go to main campus as far as I know, walk on campus and take pictures. Now, if you're taking pictures of the female students, they might not like that too much. But if you want, I don't see any problem. I don't know if any problem with main campus. For River and Field campus, you would need to get in touch with people at CES. And I don't have the contacts with me right now, but you would need to contact the college and get a permission to get onto River and Field campus. They're pretty particular about letting people just wander around out there.
Yeah, well, maybe I can find an admin office and see if there are any displays or places,
Sure.
anything with wildlife I'd like to visit, if there's anything that's available to a common person like me who's an amateur photographer.
Go down to the waterfront campus, and it's right near the pavilion, if you're familiar, and Siemens Griswold Environmental Hall. They've been doing a lot of native plantings out front, and you can, see all kinds of stuff there as well. And that's open to people walking around all the time.
I'll do it. Thank you very much.
Indeed.
Hey, Jean, go ahead.
Okay, I just wanted to add a few comments to things. Regarding what time of the year bees come out, very species specific. I've done 2 surveys, year-long surveys, out on Hart Miller Island and Poplar Island. And the only way to know what is out there any particular time is to do sampling. And I would do it every 2 to 3 weeks out on these islands. Andrina are not notoriously, but they are known primarily as spring bees when they're coming out. Some of the species, like some of the Lasioglossum, which are the sweat bees, they will come out and have many generations during the spring, summer, and fall, the same species, and then overwinter. And some Lasioglossum will overwinter as adults in wood and in sticks and things like that. Again, depends on the species. And of course, bumblebee queens, as you mentioned, they will overwinter, whereas all the rest of the bumblebees die out. It's just the queen that lasts. And then I'll just throw in a plug, Pamela. I know Jordan, when he does his research, they will want to publish this stuff nationally, but keep us in mind also locally for the Maryland entomologist.
Oh, sure. Yeah.
Because we do publish various studies down here. But like I said, I'm sure Cornell wants national journals for the work that they're doing, but some of the work that you're doing might be appropriate for the Maryland entomologist.
Sure, absolutely. Is there a way you could get your contact info to me?
Yes, absolutely. I was just looking for your contact information because I did finally find your article here about
Yes,
about the bees, but I didn't see a contact.
it's P. Cowart-Rickman 2 at washcall.edu.
Okay.
So it's P. Cowart-Rickman 2 at washcall.edu. So yeah, send me some info and or send me your contact info, and
I
then
can do that.
we'll keep you posted on what's going on.
Okay. And I can get your, in case I probably wrote it down wrong, but I can get it from Bronwyn.
Yes. Yeah.
Okay. Very good. Thank you.
Thank
and
you.
To kind of follow up on Richard's talk too, your pictures, Pamela, were amazing.
Thank you.
I could just sit there and look at them forever. How did
I've got a whole bunch more.
Yeah, I'm sure. Do you have any tips or tricks for folks who want to go out there and photograph bees? Not the pinned ones, because that's easy, but the ones that are flitting around.
Patience, lots of patience. I use a Nikon D500 right now. I started out with a long lens, 70 to 200 lens, just a regular lens. But then I got a 105 millimeter macro lens, which I have to have more patience and get closer to the insect, but you get better pictures, close-up pictures. There are a lot of people doing insect photos, so that you'll find a lot of stuff on YouTube and such. They've got all kinds of flash units, all kinds of things. But I just go out with a camera and sneak up. But it takes a lot of patience. I am thinking about using the flash now, but there's a little extra weight to be going out in the marsh, lugging a flash around. But that's what I do. I just go out and spend time getting to know the insects and just watching them. And just patience. That's the big thing right there is patience. But yeah, that's the camera equipment I use, and the D500 has a very fast shutter rate, so that's also something else because a lot of these insects, especially the bees, they move really fast. So you're going to shoot off maybe 10 or more frames, and you're going to get one that's in focus, because they're moving. And, we're just human. So.
Yeah, and they move slower on cooler days and they move way faster when it's nice and sunny.
Yep.
But and more of them will be usually out when the weather is nice. That's the nice thing with butterfly and bee research is you do it on beautiful sunny days.
Exactly. Light is important too. Yeah, when you're getting your photos. Yep.
And if you all are a fan of her photography, if you're looking for something similar in that vein, there's a beautiful free documentary called My Garden of 1,000 Bees. Bee City and Bee Campus members have a free screening tool to share it publicly, but anyone can watch it for free online. I think it's through Nova, but it's My Garden of 1,000 Bees.
Nice.
And a good book, Bees in Your Backyard, if you're looking for beautiful photos of a variety of bee species. Bees in Your Backyard.
Yeah, that's a great book. That guy has an Instagram account too, and he's always doing posts, and I'll go through and tell you how to, yep, there you go. Jean's got it. He will tell you how to pronounce all those names too on his Instagram account.
All
Yeah,
right,
he's fat.
Roland asked, we had a couple more questions. What are the best bee habitat signs available? And what are alternatives to using hardwood mulch, since mulch may hamper ground nesting bees?
I'll do a shameless plug. The Xerces Society has beautiful habitat signs. Xerces or Bee City and Bee Campus members get a free pollinator habitat sign, but you can also get them for a donation. Here's I put it in the chat. It's if you go to xerces.org/gifts or gifts.xerces.org, you can get to it. But you don't need to make anything. You can, or rather buy anything. You can just make your own, laminate a piece of paper, nothing fancy. And just, you can have kids draw something that can be really effective for letting if you're like doing it for your home or smaller scale, that can be a fun way to involve kids in pollinator conservation. But our signs are last about 5 to 10 years in bright light and hot weather and snow and all that. But I am a big fan of ours. I use them in my yard, but if you just Google pollinator habitat sign, you can find a good variety, especially on Etsy. You can find a lot of neat designs there.
And what about the mulch?
Oh yeah, leaf litter can be a great mulch that breaks down about in 1 year, depending on the type of leaf. So I would highly recommend just letting leaves fall where they want to fall. And, you of course need to clear them from paths, but leaf litter is super, super important to a variety of species, pollinators, bees, and butterflies and moths and other beneficial insects. So holding on to that native leaf litter is my #1 recommendation. But a lot of times I think with ground nesting bees, you aren't necessarily you kind of have to look at where they want to be. And that's part of the research that Pamela was talking about with Cornell, is that there's a lot of unknowns of like, it's not like you can buy them and put them in the ground. So part of it is kind of searching for what habitat seems like a likely spot, and then just seeing what seems to do well for them and what species are there, plant species are there, what's the canopy like overhead, and just kind of getting a sense of what do they want naturally. Is there good drainage? And then seeing maybe it may just be mowing the grass real short in that area so they have access. But if there's a thick thatch of grass, you're not going to get a lot of native bees. And if it's really waterlogged year round, you're not going to get a lot of bees. But if it's seasonally waterlogged, you may actually have there are ground nesting bees that can survive underwater in wetlands that then when they dry out in the summer, they emerge and they're okay. And so you really kind of have to look at what's working for your area and kind of work with the kind of figure out what native plants are around and what the regimen, like maybe mowing regimen that seems to work for them, or but it could be also just clearing stuff out after, like letting leaves fall, and once everything's emerged in the spring, you can clear things out a little like in the summer. But for the most part, just trying to recreate natural habitat is kind of our advice. But it also just depends on the area and depends on the species. Like, because like bumblebee queens, or rather, like at bumblebee queens, they'll dig if they get a little extra mulch on them, if they're they're overwintering in leaf litter. Like, and a lot of, like in my yard, I do cardboard and then wood chips, and I've had the tunnel ground nesting bees chew right through that and emerge in the spring, no problem. And so it kind of depends on the size of the bee and the species, I think. I don't know if anyone else wants to weigh in with their experience with that.
Within the program, are there ways that you are monitoring any of the status and trends of are we seeing more bees in the bee city areas or on the campus? Are we identifying more and tracking them? Is there any quantitative data on that?
Unfortunately, it's extremely hard to get like a population volume survey of bees. It's part of the reason is like the number of bees you'll find in a landscape day to day varies and hour to hour varies. The ability for people to identify the species that they have is extremely hard. Many of the species, as Pamela was saying, you have to bring experts together to figure it out. It can be very challenging to collect that data about all bees. So I don't have anything like that, but Xerces does have a program called Bumblebee Watch. It's bumblebeewatch.org, and it's a community science project where anyone around North America can take pictures of bumblebees from like basically 3 angles and tell us where they found it, when they found it, and upload those photos. And then there's a little key to help you identify the bumblebee, and then we can collect that data and we share it with multiple universities and nonprofits, and it goes into year-round data gathering that's going on for years and years. And so that gives us a sense of when different bumblebee species, when they're emerging for the year and when they're tapering off. And year to year, if that range of dates that they're active is changing for different bumblebee species. So stuff like that gives us long-term data that will allow us to see some trends, but it's a very difficult endeavor to try to understand the actual volume. But I like Bumblebee Watch. I think of it as like Pokemon Go for bumblebees. So it's a really kid-friendly activity. You can walk around your neighborhood and take photos, or when you're camping or hiking, go, oh, I haven't seen that one, and try to, see something new when you're on vacation or just in your own backyard. It can be a really fun way to participate in community science.
Oh, great. I'm going to look that up. Do we have any other questions? Are you working with any other communities or schools in Maryland at this moment? Are they working on?
Yes, we have about 14 bee cities in Maryland, and we have 4 universities. So we have Annapolis. Oh, I'm sorry. It says Annapolis, but it's actually, yeah, no, it's Annapolis now. They used to be the county, but now it's just Annapolis. Berlin, Berwyn Heights, College Park, Greenbelt, Havre de Grace, Howard County, La Plata, Laurel, Middleton. Hopefully I'm pronouncing that right. Salisbury, University Park, and Westminster. And bee campuses, we have College of Southern Maryland, Salisbury University. Shout out to University of Maryland. I saw we have someone from there. And of course, Washington University or Washington College. But we're always growing. We add about 50 new bee cities and bee campuses per year. So there's the more the merrier.
Great. Karen asked, when is it acceptable to clean up your garden so as not to affect bees and other pollinators?
I always feel like it sounds kind of like witchy, but it's like you kind of have to like observe your garden each year. And so it's like, when are the flowers blooming? And after like the flowers have really starting to come up and you start seeing bees visiting those flowers, you're kind of looking for evidence that ground nesting bees are emerging and stem nesting bee species are emerging. Then it's a little that would be a better time to clean up, is once those spring bees have kind of left those sites. But if you're not certain how much is still underground and whatnot, you could take those stems and kind of stack them in the sun somewhere so they can still emerge without being destroyed by putting them in compost and whatnot. That's what I do. But yeah, leaf litter, hopefully you can just let it break down where it is and just kind of move forward with your garden plans with those leaves there. Of course, you can relocate leaves for sure, especially after the bumblebee queens have emerged. But it is kind of like one of those things where you kind of read the landscape a little. I'd say summer is a good time, but by fall, don't touch anything if you can, and let those stems stay up and dead for the rest of the year until spring, if you can pull it off.
Yeah, I think relocating them is a good idea. There's little architectural tent-like things you can make that, and then you just start stacking all that type of material in these little, architectural units in your garden, which looks kind of interesting and also maintains that material.
All
I like-
right. Go ahead.
Oh, that's it. Go ahead.
Well, this has been wonderful. You've inspired us. It's so exciting to see what's going on at Washington College, and especially Pamela. I don't think that you are a trained entomologist, but you just got hooked on into this, and you have gone bee crazy, which is wonderful. And that's what we hope. Most science is done by us, the non-scientists, because you just have to get out there and start looking. And when you look, you see things, and then when you see things, you ask questions, and it's a wonderful loop to get into. So thank you, Laura, for all your work that you're doing with Bee Cities and Bee Campuses. I hope that we can add some more to that, and we'll be looking for bumblebees and doing all that good stuff. But thank you, and everybody, for joining us this evening, and we'll see you next time we'll learn about hurricanes.
Thank you so
Thank
much.
you.
This is wonderful.
Good night, everybody.
All right. Thank you.